Good morning, this is Paul Chek. Welcome back to my video blog. Today I have a very exciting topic for you. I call this balancing the rational and the irrational, which is a very important concept, particularly today in our industrialized, wound up, highly mechanized world. So let's have a look at what I have in store for you today. First of all, when it comes to understanding the concept of the rational and the irrational, it's important to point out that we're talking about qualities of the human mind. But before we get into that, it's important to realize that our individual minds are expressions of the mind of the universe, if you will. If you look at the basic quality of the universe, and if you think of a mind as that which orders information, then we can see, just looking at the universe, there's two basic qualities. There's order and there's chaos. You have a planet that you're on, it's quite orderly, it's a living system, yet if you look out into the sky, you can see that there is all sorts of things. In telescopes, you see clouds of dust, you see everything from stars form to stars exploding, so there's this constant interchange between structure and order, and structure, order, and bound energy, and chaos or unbound energy. In this sense, structure and order would be yin, the feminine, and unbound energy would be yang, the masculine. So that's the nature of the universe itself, within which our mind participates and not only utilizes the information available to us through the universal mind, but contributes to it as a co-contributor, particularly when you're awake. Then you know what you're doing. So let's look at some of the qualities of the mind and how that might relate to some of the challenges people are having in their life today. So here you can see my Tai Chi symbol. Yin I ascribe as the rational, yang the irrational. The rational relates very much to the concept of science, which is weighing, measuring, deduction, logic, induction, reduction, measuring, rules, should, shouldn't, right, wrong. And then on the other side we have art, which is the functional antagonist. No rules, no worry about reduction, deduction, it's just creative self-expression. Now, Albert Einstein went a long way with a key statement to explain in his own special way the importance of balancing these two. He said, science without religion is lame. And he said, religion, which I've got on the art side here, without science is blind. So one of the greatest scientists that ever walked the planet made it very clear right there that the rational and the irrational need each other, and one without the other leads to problems. And as I'm about to show you, we have a lot more of one than we do the other, and it's leading to plenty of challenges that we could easily avoid, as I will share. So the I, or ego mind, the mind of your own, that which you can use to do the things you want to do. Yin, the square, is a symbol for yin. It binds energy into structure. So the rational components of our ego mind represent bound energy. So I have to save a certain amount of money to pay my bills. You've got to bind that energy up. It represents structure, thus the square, and rules. Typically, wherever you have structure, you have rules. If you're a carpenter, there's principles or rules for building that you must follow. If you're a scientist, there's rules you must follow. Yin relates to material, the material world, and to things. And science and yin, in this sense, relate to logic, that which is logical, and words. Almost anything we can express as logical, we have to express with words. It relates to work. Work is where you go and create energy which is largely bound. You're working in a system with rules and regulations, and it's binding you to specific tasks and functions, and then you get a certain amount of money, which you use largely, most people, to maintain the home or the structure that they have created, and therefore they take money from a bound situation. You have to bind it to accumulate it, and it goes back into their life largely as bound energy, which can create a problem, as I'll show you. It can also be very helpful. The I-mind-yin function, or the rational, is outcome-oriented. It's very rational to make enough money to pay your bills. It's very rational to do a good job. It's very rational to be a good student. It's very rational to be a good soldier and get promoted in rank. So those are all things that are outcome-oriented. This part of our mind and part of our function is very, very socially oriented and is governed by herd values. So what is the values of your religion? What is the values of your corporation that you work for? What are the values of society around issues such as sex, abortion, masturbation, money, success, fame, the use of drugs, all that stuff, all relates to herd values. For example, medical marijuana is only now becoming popular and accepted, yet there's still a massive number of people that are very, very against the legalization of marijuana, while being very for the support of drugs that are 1,000,000 times more dangerous, and they'll pop those willy-nilly and kill themselves while, frowning at marijuana. Why? Because those are herd values. Those people's values largely come from reading newspapers and watching television, like the rest of the herd. This aspect, the rational, is also very oriented around hierarchy. When you go to work, there's a boss, there's a manager. If you're in the military, you have a commanding officer. This whole thing works on hierarchy. Then we have this nasty word that goes with this column of the rational, which is expectation. Wherever you go to bind your energy to build your home, there's expectation. If you're in school, there's expectation. Expectation is hand in hand with this whole side of the ego's mental state. Now, these qualities in nature are functionally balanced by the irrational. So the irrational qualities, where we have bound energy over here, we have unbound energy. But before I go further, the I-mind yin state of binding energy is counterbalanced by what I call I-soul, my soul, your creative impulse that doesn't really give a damn about rules, believe me. Yang, and it is expressive energy. So when you're with your soul and you get rid of all the rules, energy just flows out of you, just comes all out naturally, like a kid playing. They don't rules. Give me a break. Watch a kid play without a bunch of parents around, and you'll see the soul nature come out. Okay, so the yang nature is unbound energy, while the yin is bound. Where we have structure and rules in the rational, the irrational is unstructured, and it represents your own rules. So if you're playing, you make up the rules. If you're playing with your friends, kids make up their own rules. If you're doing art, only you can decide whether you've made a mistake or not. So you impose your own rules while expressing the irrational elements of yourself. Where we have a focus on material things, or material gain or things, here the expression is immaterial, and it's largely oriented around your dreams. This is weighable and measurable. I've never seen a scale that'll weigh a dream. So just like weighing bodies, when people are overweight or weight fixated, they keep weighing themselves, and it usually just adds more and more stress. And oftentimes they do feel alleviated as they're losing weight, but they're doing it in dangerous ways. So they get tricked with all this logic, order, rules, and don't realize that oftentimes they just need to let go and let live a little bit. where this is based on logic and words, wherever you work, wherever you practice science, there's always manuals, there's always procedures of conducts, ethical codes, etc. Well, in the illogical, or the irrational, we have the illogical feeling state. So where mind is oriented toward words and logic, here it's illogical and oriented toward feelings. Children are much more oriented around their feelings than they are around words and logic. And so are artists. Where this column relates largely to work, this one, the irrational, relates to play. If you're really playing, well, then there's not a lot of logic to be involved, unless you're, playing algebra or something, which sounds like somebody needs a little tune-up on the play side. So here we go from work to play. Where this is outcome-oriented, the irrational is open-ended. So you must conclude the project to make the money. Well, here it's open-ended, so there's not really any attachment to the outcome. It's much more about the experience and the flow of it all. So for example, someone who's trapped over here constantly looks at their watch while they're running and is holding themselves bound to some expectation of themselves. But this person just goes running out in the woods, and if they see a beautiful flower, they stop and smell it. If they're running along and they see a bear walking in the woods, they might stop and talk to it. And there's stopwatches sitting in their car. Where we have herd values over here, we have individual values. So what is your own set of values as to how you express yourself when in the irrational mode? Nobody can tell you what their values are and impose them upon you if you're in the irrational. People will try, and that's one of the challenges. Our culture has a real hard time with people that exist in this mindset because they're so outcome-oriented and driven by hierarchy or rules. So where we have herd values, we have individual values. Where this is oriented on hierarchy, the irrational is based on equality. When kids are playing, they're all equal. When we're doing art, there is no rules. There's no better art or less better art, or you don't understand what the word art means. Where there's expectation here we have freedom, baby, freedom. So now, before we get too far, I want to make out a key point here. I want you to think of what most people are buying drugs for every day. Heart disease, high blood pressure, inflammation throughout their body, psychological diseases, ADD, depression, anxiety. We got so much pills going out the door largely over these issues. All I have to do to make my point is just ask you, what would your stress level be like and your health be like if you only worked, followed rules, were constantly outcome-oriented, and suffered the pain of always having to do what everybody else thinks you do because they're too afraid to live, play, and have fun? And how do you feel when your life is constantly full of expectation? What would happen to you if I sentenced you to 3 or 4 years in that environment without any of this stuff? I'll tell you what would happen. You'd be buying them pills and seeing the doctors just like the rest of them out there. And here's something quite true and scary. Those that get trapped in here also try to turn to the irrational elements over here. So what does that mean? If the herd legalizes alcohol and not marijuana, then they will express the irrational within the herd mentality. So they'll make themselves sick because it's legal to do it. It's legal to be screwed up. It's legal to be in a confusing religion. It's legal to tell someone you're having a great day when they ask you, how you doing today? You say, oh, I'm feeling great. Our whole culture's doing that because they're actually afraid to let their feelings out. They're afraid to be honest. So we have a lot of problems. Now that said, if we go to this side, we can get in trouble if we stay over here too much too. If we're always unbound in our energy, we usually can't pay our bills, we can't feed ourselves. So this would be like a squirrel that gets stoned and forgets to gather nuts. If you have too much unstructure and you live only by your own rules, you may get away with that for a while, but in most environments, whether you be out in nature or whether you be in a city, there has to be some sort of guideline, some sort of directive, so that we can achieve an outcome, because life requires that we meet specific needs, such as food, shelter, warmth, safety, and love, which requires that we work together. If we have too much of an immaterial or dreamlike focus, then we get labeled as an airhead or a bliss bunny. And that may not be a problem for you. Some people can convert that into an income, but in general this leads to a person that becomes unproductive and doesn't contribute to the growth and development of family, society, or culture. If you're too illogical and you're too feeling oriented, then it's very, very hard for people to have a relationship with you, because relationships require that we participate with each other and that we have agreements with each other. And if somebody's too illogical, they usually don't follow agreements, and they're usually acting out their feelings without really thinking, is it true? It just is like a kid throwing a tantrum. If you're always playing, which may be good if you can get away with it, but play usually requires some kind of support. What do you like to play with? Do you like to go out and race dirt bikes? Well, somehow you've got to bind enough energy to buy a dirt bike and a truck to get it out there. So play certainly has an important function, but I think you're starting to see that one without the other always leads to an imbalance. If everything's open-ended, then there's no way to perceive an outcome. You can't plan for anything. You can't know how many nuts to eat to make it through the winter. Your individual values are very, very important, but if your individual values cannot be effectively interfaced with the herd, then you're likely to be always in conflict with people in relationships, whether it be bosses, managers, friends, co-workers. So that can be a problem. If you're overly equality-based, you can get yourself in lots of trouble, because the consciousness of equality says everybody's equal. Well, what do you do when you're running a company and the person that's supposed to be running the company has 10 times more knowledge and experience than everybody else, but those that focus only on equality give that person an equal vote compared to the guy who takes the garbage out or washes the dishes? So the concept of equality can be very dangerous, because it often puts too much weight on those that don't have effective knowledge or skills to contribute, and leads to decisions being made that are irrational. Freedom is fantastic, but freedom to the extreme means to exclude the other half of reality. So what I've just shown you here is that and as a therapist, this is my opinion, if a person is going to be healthy, there has to be a balance between these two in a person's life, or disease is very likely, depression is very likely, anxiety is very likely, all the problems that we see. Having been a therapist for 30 years and treated untold numbers of cases of everything you can think about, and having piles and piles of patients on all sorts of mind-altering drugs due to stress and disorders of every type you can imagine, I can promise you that our culture is dangerously caught over here and very afraid to live over here for fear of what the herd and what hierarchy will think, and even sometimes what science says. Oftentimes people believe in science so much, like something in a newspaper saying such and such is bad for you, that they actually believe it without looking further into it, which leads to lots of problems. So what do we do to balance our rational and our irrational? Well, one, as I show in my 1, 2, 3, 4 for overcoming addiction, obesity, and disease, all of which are extremely common, you need to have a dream bigger than your problem. As Jerry West says, when you have a big enough dream, you don't need a crisis. And when you have a big enough dream and you're honest about it, you're also honest about making sure that these qualities of your mind and your spiritual life, your soul, stay balanced or you're not that committed to your dream. You're confused. So once we understand what our dream is, we look to see where we're out of balance. Then we have to make choices relative to our values over quiet or introspection, movement, exercise, diet, and all of those should support our happiness or our dream. My goal here today was to share my feelings and my thoughts as a therapist dealing with these problems on a daily basis, to encourage you to get out of the box once in a while, and also, if you're too out of the box, to jump into the box as needed to support your dream and keep yourself balanced so you can live your dream fully, make intelligent choices, and spend time with the 4 doctors within you, because they're wiser and cheaper than anyone you can see on the street or find in a phone book. So I hope you enjoy spending a little time exploring your own rational and irrational elements and looking at how they relate to your experience that you're having. How are you doing with creating your dreams, balance in your life, making intelligent choices based on your 4 doctor values? It's a lot easier to do this for yourself than to run around to doctors and therapists and wait till your life's screwed up and you can't poop anymore, you've lost your sex drive, your skin's sagging, your boobs are sagging, your dick won't stand up, your joints ache, and you sit around watching other people play sports on television and make love and believe the commercials and buy garbage. So we can do a lot better together. We can have a tremendous balance of the art and the science, and we can avoid being lame and avoid being blind and be more like Einstein. Thanks for joining me today. Look forward to my next video blog with you. I'm Paul Chek.